please join me in welcoming Mayor Harrisburg.
Hey. I have to say now I'm really interested in what Gene Barr had to say. So when we get to the questions and answers, we're going to have to talk about that because he is an enigma to me. In his private life, he is always advocating, and we seem to be at opposite sides of the political spectrum. He's the conservative Republican arguing for self-sufficiency and discipline and individualism and a lot of values that often influence the sort of political dynamics at the Capitol. But then on this issue of the Civil War Museum, he's for government subsidy, a lack of self-sufficiency, and we butted heads almost in the exact opposite thing. So you were talking about compromise and values. I would love to figure out how to reach a compromise with Gene Barr, but on different issues, it seems like the core values are completely different. And we can talk about that if you'd like. I have to say, I was at Harrisburg Academy this morning, and I did an hour really serious conversation about educational reform and its importance for Harrisburg from an economic development standpoint and a public safety standpoint. And we could talk about some of that if you'd like. And I've been doing a variety of forums on public safety and other things, and we could do some of that. I am open to discuss anything that you would like and talk about my values and the city's values, and even put it in the context of what is going to be happening in Harrisburg, which is that we are going to be moving to establish a new city charter. And what a charter is essentially a statement of values. And it is, right now, the city is sort of the creation of the Commonwealth. But part of self-determination and the ability to set our tax levels at the rates that we want and to establish real civic engagement and connection to government, all of that requires the city to go through a charter process. And at the core of that is going to be values. What are going to be the fundamental values that we put in that charter? So maybe we can turn to that. But I've done this panel before now for the last several years, and I thought I would come with an official speech for you today, and it is on the agenda as State of the City. So I figured, why not? I'm going to give you an actual State of the City address, and you can hear some of that. But I won't be too long with the State of the City. I'll give you a brief overview of what we're doing, and then let's go right to the questions and the back and forth, because you are a talented group, and I think we can have a really good conversation about governing and values and compromise and everything else. So, but let's begin with a formal State of the City. I don't get to do this too often. It's nice every once in a while to stop and take stock of where we've come and what we've accomplished, and I think this might be the right venue and group. So it is great to be here once again now for the Community Leadership Series class of 2016. I think I did 2015 and 2014 as well. This is a wonderful program, and it's really an honor to be here to help you learn about the important issues that impact Harrisburg and our region. As always, I'm delighted to join you at these events because I know that all of you in this room are first and foremost dedicated to serving your communities, be it in the city of Harrisburg or in your own neighborhood or your own townships. By a show of hands, how many people are from Harrisburg, just out of curiosity? So, yeah, oh, well, that's pretty good. That's pretty good group. One of the hallmarks of Leadership Harrisburg is its focus on connecting talented leaders of tomorrow and today, such as yourselves, to the specific needs of communities. And with so many challenges facing cities such as Harrisburg, it's your talents, your passion, and your dedication which we so desperately need to harness and tap for the good of us all. It would be easy, I think, for you all to simply climb your own personal and corporate ladders, take care of your own selves, your own families, pursue your own individual dreams. But if you're in this room and you believe in Leadership Harrisburg area, it's clear that you are not about taking the easy path. You understand the role that each of us must play together in solving the problems of the region as a whole. A little more than 2 years ago, it seems so long ago now, I decided I could not take the easy path in my own life. I needed to do something to try and help our capital city survive. So I stepped out of the comfort of my own business, a bookstore that I built from scratch in Midtown Harrisburg, and I decided to enter really in a way that I never would have predicted for myself, the sort of rough and tumble world of politics, and to run for mayor and to enter into City Hall. And I knew that that was a choice, and it was going to be a journey that would be not easy. And I think really that was an understatement. But it has been very rewarding. And it's been rewarding because despite the obstacles and the opposition and challenges, we as a group have been able to stop the city's collective free fall into receivership and into bankruptcy. And we placed the city finally on a firm course towards its economic recovery. And there's a long road behind us already, but there's an equally long and promising road ahead. When I first took office, businesses were fleeing. There were for sale signs everywhere. I just spoke to city realtor Wendell Hoover very recently, and he closed on 5 sales just in the last week. And I think that's really an incredible sign. And, you know, basically the city was under receivership, which meant that we had lost our sovereignty. The state had to come in and take over government. And if you compare that to today, a few weeks ago, we just announced that there are more than 12 technology companies that have recently come and set up shop in Harrisburg. In fact, we're having something of a tech boom in Harrisburg as each of these is building on one another. And that's real jobs, and that is real growth in terms of people moving into the city. We also have big corporations such as Xerox and Deloitte that have really rushed and flocked to open new offices here in downtown Harrisburg. And the city is no longer in receivership. In fact, what we are doing right now in city government is trying to adopt the best way forward out of Act 47. And it was my goal when I ran for mayor to get the city out of Act 47. I'm going to stay the course until we do it. We're not there yet. It does require this charter process that we can talk about, and a new tax and the LST and a variety of other changes to get the city sustainable. But then we will have a long-term budget that can actually pay for the expenses of government, and that's what it's all about. Not spending more than you take in revenue. Now, the changes in Harrisburg within the past 2.5 years, in my opinion, have been nothing short of miraculous. We now are well on the way to creating a city where people not only want to work and play and eat, but a place where they want to call home. And when I took office, I set several basic priorities. They're, as you know, tackling crime, reducing blight, stimulating economic development, and ensuring that the city always operated on fundamentally a balanced budget, because that's what got us in trouble. And the city was battling an increase in crime when I took office. Some areas were marred, and they still are, but we're literally marred with hundreds and hundreds of abandoned and dilapidated houses. And trash basically littered our streets and littered our alleys. And in fact, there was a general malaise that had set in Harrisburg, and some had even lost sight of the incredible beauty and history and partnerships that have really characterized both our downtown and our neighborhood and our historic success. And I'm happy to tell you that today Harrisburg is a far different place than it was just 2 years ago. The overall crime rate dropped last year to the lowest level in more than a decade, with the most serious violent crimes dropping by more than 17%. Harrisburg is a safer city, and this is lost somewhat in the discussion of the gun violence which is happening in Harrisburg, which is still way too high and is a real problem. And we should talk about the prevalence of illegal guns in the city. I was speaking to a school group just last week, and they wanted to make sure that I knew, and I want to make sure that you know, and we can talk about this, that within a 5-minute walk of anywhere in Harrisburg, you can purchase a gun illegally. And we've got to address that as one of the root causes of our violence problem, that in our educational system. So But in overall terms, aggregate numbers, a lot of crime, with the exception of the murder rate, has declined and declined significantly in Harrisburg over the past 2 years. And our Chief Carter, has really done a wonderful job. And even where we've had violent crime, we are making arrests, and we're making them quickly and swiftly. Harrisburg is also a much cleaner city today than it was. Now everyone in Harrisburg has a new trash can, a new recycling bin. That makes it easier for properties to stay free of litter and to get trash off the streets. We've also increased recycling in the 2 years in Harrisburg by 3 times. That's a major, major accomplishment. We went from basically recycling very little in the city of Harrisburg to tripling it into really being a leader in terms of recycling for the region. And some of that was as easy as providing every home in Harrisburg with a large bin for recycling, but also making it easier to recycle with this mixed stream recycling, which means you can put all your different recyclables, from cardboard to newspapers to plastic, all in one container, and you don't have to separate it out, and that is really incredible. We've also started fundamentally tackling the abandoned and blighted buildings, restoring a sense of ownership and pride in our historic neighborhoods. And part of that was cataloging the buildings, part of that was prioritizing the buildings, and part of that was establishing enough of a financial groundwork that we could properly staff and supply our sanitation department so that we could free up workers to be able to go out and do demolition. And just yesterday, the in-house demolition crew took down 2 buildings really in the heart of Allison Hill on Swedera Street that are the first of 12 that are going to go down here in the next month, and hopefully we're going to hit 30 or 40 of those really badly condemned buildings that have just been sitting there for years due to a lack of resources and focus. And what's most important, I have sent the city council a balanced budget every year that I've been in office. And this year we were able to pass a budget that allowed us to hire for the first time new employees, over a dozen new employees in our Public Works Department, which will mean potholes get filled faster, the trash gets collected more efficiently, and buildings like the buildings on Swedera Street yesterday get torn down. We have a really aggressive demolition schedule that is planned for Harrisburg, and we're well on the way to making our city the beautiful capital that we all know it can be. I can't really emphasize the hiring enough, because part of what we have done with city government is we have restructured government so that we have now a neighborhood services department which is funded through the sanitation rates and which is adequately staffed so that it can provide a much higher and better level of service than we've ever had. And at the same time that we've done that, we've been able to take the pressure off the general fund because we have a limited tax base, and it's and real estate revenues and others have actually been declining over the years, and we've been able to pay for that through investment back into sanitation, which is the way utility rates are supposed to work. But in Harrisburg, it was never the way that it worked in the past, because in the past, you paid your water bill or you paid your sanitation bill, that went to cover debt or cover borrowing, and it didn't get put back into investment in our neighborhoods. So this is all very good news for a city determined to reverse population loss, stimulate economic growth, and reclaim its status as a preeminent capital city. And the malaise that once dominated our streets has been replaced by a new adrenaline of recovery and revitalization. In fact, we've spent the past months engaging the community in a new comprehensive plan that will chart the course of the city's history for the next 2 decades. Harrisburg has a new dynamism. It's easily felt. I think you all can feel it. And it's not only along the bustling 2nd or 3rd streets in downtown and midtown, but it's deep into our neighborhoods in Allison Hill, in Uptown, or on the south side. And it's important to note that the comprehensive plan is the first time such an in-depth look has been undertaken in the city in more than 40 years. And we began this month-long process in March of last year and have engaged thousands of residents in thinking through Harrisburg's future. Can't underemphasize what that has meant enough. We have had literally scores and scores of public meetings. We have engaged thousands of city residents, asking them what's their vision for the future, what do they want to see from a planning standpoint, What amenities are missing, what transportation needs are there, what economic development needs are there, what parks and recreation needs are there, what do people want to see. And we've developed an amazing plan that we're going to launch and that is going to provide this sort of guiding document for how we prioritize and channel the limited funding that we have and our opportunities for grants and federal funding as we move forward in the future. And that process, I think, has really reinvigorated the civic spirit of the city, and we can translate that now into a new charter movement moving forward. Thinking through Harrisburg's housing needs has been at the core of many of the committee meetings and the town hall forums and the brainstorming sessions that have been a part of the comprehensive planning process. Experts, officials, and ordinary citizens have spent months debating solutions to improving our housing stock, tackling abandoned buildings and blight, and revitalizing our neighborhoods. These often intense discussions have led to the development of a housing strategy for Harrisburg, a much overdue housing strategy, but one that is designed to improve the quality of life for existing residents and attract new people to make their homes in our city. We have 6 specific goals that are part of the housing strategy that has been developed as a part of this comprehensive planning process over the past year and a half. 1, our goal is to ensure that all residents have safe, attractive, and affordable housing. 2, we're looking to achieve a 50-50 ratio of home ownership to renters in the city's housing stock within the next 10 years. We think that is doable, and that is a key to the city's revitalization. We want to promote mixed-use housing, reducing the number of people that live at or below the poverty level in any one concentration in any particular neighborhood. We want to ensure that appropriate housing options are at the core of all neighborhood planning and promote a sense of placemaking to create connected and vibrant communities. We want to provide incentives for this type of development, financial incentives, tax incentives, and we want to preserve the existing housing stock wherever feasible to protect and preserve our historic buildings, which really are one of the wonderful things that makes Harrisburg such a beautiful and historic city. Our most important goal in this new dynamic Harrisburg is to make sure that every resident of Harrisburg lives in a decent, affordable, and safe house. And to this end, we've identified areas throughout the city for appropriate new construction and redevelopment. In 2014, we revised our zoning code, another major endeavor to allow a wider variety of housing options. And we're going to continue to review that code and modify the code so that it allows for this appropriate housing in all neighborhoods. We're doing an inventory of special housing needs as we speak to support social services, housing for the homeless, emergency shelter, etc. And we're determined to achieve our goal of eradicating homelessness, first for veterans in the city. And we've already made a great stride in ensuring that no veterans are without shelter. Organizations in our city are now more easily communicating and coordinating services to eligible veterans. And these organizations are committed to responding within 24 hours to any veteran who needs emergency shelter or services in our city and throughout the region. And we will continue to monitor the status quo of our housing to ensure that there's adequate and appropriate housing for all of our citizens. Harrisburg is in full recovery mode, but the key to that recovery is attracting new residents and new homeowners. And we want our recovery not only to stimulate new businesses and investment in the downtown, but throughout the whole city, strengthening our communities, revitalizing our historic neighborhoods. So we hope to use as many tools as we can to encourage development throughout the city. Right now, we're streamlining the processes for developers to acquire property for repair and rehabilitation. We expect to be able to use the new city land bank, Harrisburg Land Bank, to get rid of abandoned and blighted properties and target areas for revitalization. We are identifying state and federal funds to help leverage private funding for real estate development in our city. We also hope to be able to offer incentives to investors through what's called the Local Economic Revitalization Assistance Program, sometimes called the LRTA or tax abatement, that Harrisburg City Council passed last year, and which I am very hopeful the school district will finally pass this month. I've gotten some indications it's going to be on the agenda. That's a big deal because that is a full 10-year abatement on all new residential construction and building rehabilitation. It also permits mixed-use facilities, and it offers incentives for commercial development and investment based on the number of jobs created. And if you're interested, we can talk more about it. It's I think a watershed program, and it's going to mean a lot for the city as we move forward. All of these tools will go a long way towards achieving the goal of tackling blight, developing our housing stock, and beautifying our neighborhoods. We've done some other things. Just as an aside, we established a housing court, which has now made it easier to go after absentee landlords and others for violations. We now have a focused single district justice that handles all of the cases, actually a district justice who is not from the city. We can talk about the district justice system and how that can sometimes be an impediment to change, or can be used in the way we're using it to achieve really good goals. We've also done a review. We're cooperating better than ever with the county with regard to properties that are abandoned and end up on the repository list or the for sale list, or go to auction at these upset auctions that occur on a yearly basis. There's now a fundamental review and a city land bank which is looking to make sure that when opportunities present themselves to acquire parcels and bundle those parcels for development, we're out there aggressively using our limited resources to help prepare them for private investment. We're witnessing an increasing interest in downtown living and renting in Harrisburg. And in response to this surge in demand, we have a variety of new apartment buildings underway in downtown Harrisburg, and we expect to see this trend continue, if not intensify, in the coming years. Harristown, WCI partners, a variety of developers have basically taken older office buildings and sort of Class B or C office space and converted that into a new residential use. All of those development projects, and there's several, they're even more underway, are oversubscribed at the moment. And they're bringing a lot of new people into the city who value and who look forward to city living. It's a major trend, and it's pretty incredible. We're looking at over 100 new residential units converted from office units just in the past several years, and several hundred more in the planning stages. So, in fact, within a decade, we want to see 50% of all homes in the city of Harrisburg owned by those who live in them. And that would be an increase of 10% in the current home ownership that we have now. So we're not quite there yet, but we can get there. And we've made some progress in attracting new homeowners. In part, we've provided a subsidy for city workers who purchase homes in the city. And we've joined with Pinnacle Health, our largest private employer, to offer, they offer a $5,000 subsidy to any of their workers who want to live in the city, and with PHFA to help spur and encourage investment in home ownership. We need more businesses, though, to step up and provide similar incentives to stimulate home ownership. And for many of our residents, securing financing continues to be a challenge. And the main issue really to that continually seems to be low credit scores and not having enough cash on hand for a down payment. And we've taken steps to try and address both of those issues. We currently use our limited federal CDBG dollars to assist low and moderate income residents in coming up with those funds for down payments. And we're working with the Pennsylvania Housing Finance Agency to create a loan pool to help provide mortgages to people whose credit scores are too low for traditional loans. We believe a loan pool through a consortium of banks and financial institutions would help spread that risk and open some doors that are currently closed to those seeking home ownership currently. So our housing plan is focused on preserving the beauty and history of our existing housing stock whenever possible, to maintain the city's charm and to keep families connected to their roots. But we're also working on programs to help families maintain their homes, utilizing HUD, CDBG, and other resources to provide grants and financing for repairs. And you may have also read that we recently received a very large lead abatement grant from the federal government, one of, as much as Baltimore, as much as Philadelphia, one of a few cities in the nation to receive that. And that's going to make a big difference in families that want to continue to live in an aging housing stock but have to deal with the problems of lead paint. Every house, as you know, every historic home in Harrisburg has lead paint. And if those houses aren't maintained and that paint begins to chip or fail, then it can become a serious, serious health hazard. So we're now in the process of transforming a long-neglected part of our city by investing $27 million to beautify the streetscape and renovate dilapidated housing between Derry and Mulberry Street. This is an area called Mulder Square, and it's a project that we've worked on. We want that area to be an anchor for the eventual revitalization of all of Allison Hill. but it was felt that we could make a greater impact if we pooled all of our collective energies into a single area and then worked out from there. So this is the area basically between the YWCA and the Allison Hill Boys and Girls Club. It's a very difficult area in Harrisburg. It's a high crime area. There's a lot of abandoned housing. We're focusing all of our attention there. The housing authorities are focusing their attention there. We're going to see a lot of new development. We're working with all of our partners, and we're focusing on putting as much funding there as we can. We're opening a new police substation. We're using a variety of other tools to really see that as this Mulder Square area that we're calling as a new anchor for development into that section of our city. That project alone will directly impact the lives of hundreds of people and should be a stimulus for further development in Allison Hill. Now, those are just a few of the highlights of how Harrisburg is truly on the move and how much progress we've made stimulating economic development and attracting new residents to Harrisburg to enjoy its beauty and its culture. But I welcome your ideas and support as we all work collectively to make Harrisburg a better place to live, work, and play. So with that, you have your traditional state of the city. I could have gone on. We could have had sections on a variety of other things. But I wanted you to get a sense of the overall picture. I wanted to sort of focus on a few things like housing and the comprehensive plan that maybe you weren't as aware that were happening. But most importantly today, I want to hear from you, and I want to hear your thoughts and ideas. And I'd be really interested in talking a little bit about this charter initiative, if anybody would like to discuss it. It's a very interesting concept because at its core, by defining the values that we want to represent the future of the city, I think we can make major transformative change. And you can have a fundamental commitment to environmental justice in your charter or to educational opportunity. We could use this new charter movement as not only a means of engaging the public, but setting the values that are going to guide our policy and our partnerships and our collective efforts. So I did not know you were doing a values assessment, but it would be interesting to sort of take this list and to think about it in terms of if you were to write your own constitution, I mean, your own charter for what you would like to see guaranteed for the city. That's what we're embarking on, which is really, really exciting. So let's talk about it. Anything you'd like to talk about, I'm open. Hit me with tough questions. Yes?
Mayor Hopkins, what will be the process for putting together that charter, and then how would that influence the policies of the city?
Okay, so there are, the city's recovery plan calls for home rule, which is basically the process of establishing a new charter. Because first and foremost, the city, in order to be sustainable, has to be able to establish its own means of taxing its own residents. And right now, we are able to utilize certain taxes, like the local services tax or the earned income tax, at a rate that is only permitted because we are officially in the state's program for distressed municipalities, or Act 47. When you're in the program, you're allowed these tools, but in order to exit the program, they take them away, because originally the concept of this program was that it would be a sort of temporary spur. But the reality for a city like Harrisburg, or many of our urban cores, is that we don't have especially in Harrisburg, where the majority of property is tax exempt, where you have the major benefits, but also issues of having state government taking up so much property. You need the ability to basically, if you wish, have a higher earned income tax or a local services tax or something other than relying on just real estate taxes. They recognize that in the program of Act 47, but we need to be able to establish that long term. You can do that if you have your own charter. So a lot of the municipalities that have been exiting Act 47 have basically been establishing their own charter and using that as a means to set a sustainable tax rate. But so that's probably the initial drive for it, is to fundamentally have revenues which work for the city. But on top of that, it allows you to examine the very nature of governance. Do we want a strong mayor system of governance? In Harrisburg, that certainly led us down a problematic path at one point when that was abused. But there are also many benefits for having an executive with the power to get things done. So that's under consideration. Do we want to move to a ward system of electing our city council representatives? One of the real impediments to running for office in Harrisburg, frankly, is that you have to run citywide, and that's very difficult to do. If you had to only run neighborhood-wide, it might make it possible to get a greater pool of people that would be willing to put themselves out there. Something a little less daunting about maybe running in your neighborhood, where you know most of the people, than running citywide and having to meet everyone. There are pros and cons, but that's the sort of thing. Do we need an elected treasurer or an elected controller, which are basically part-time positions that we are required to have because we don't have a charter? We're using basically the way to think of it is we have the form government. We've got the third-class city code, optional plan of government. It's not unique to Harrisburg. It doesn't fit Harrisburg. It's just a theoretical design that was designed decades ago, and it really needs to be adapted. And I think we have issues in Harrisburg of the need for greater civic engagement, the need for greater connection to the populace. We have real issues in education and poverty, and you could have something of a social justice, or I said environmental justice. You can have a charter which basically defines your values and priorities and essentially requires your government to reflect those. I'm not saying I know what they are, but I'm saying I think it would be a good conversation to have. If we said as a community that we were going to truly make education the fundamental core, or the ability, or the create educational opportunity for everyone in the city, that could force issues of regionalizing our school system, or preventing social promotion, or really stirring the state into action for a more aggressive recovery. That's just one topic, or we could talk about the importance of eradicating poverty. We could put a foundation that would lead to a greater minimum wage, or and I'm not saying I'm in favor from that on a local city approach, but that's the sort of thing that you could do. And that's all open for discussion. I think getting people involved in that conversation, I think is a really good thing. And again, it can build off the comprehensive plan, because the comprehensive plan was about what people wanted to see in terms of very specific ideas for the city. Do you want a park? Do you want a community center? What do you want? How do you want traffic to flow in and out of the city? This is more a discussion about what are the values that we collectively share and define us as a community. What do we want to enshrine in our government and have dictate the way we act? Be interesting if we sort of mandated a vision of compromise and civil discourse, and actually put that in a founding charter, what that would actually mean and do for the city. It's not just theoretical. It is fundamentally a vision statement that's very powerful. So the way it works is, there will be a ballot initiative in the next election, in the presidential election. It will basically say, would the public like to consider the possibility of a new charter? So the question is very, very straightforward. And then people can, at that same time, run to be on the Charter Commission. And sometimes in some communities, members of city council, the mayor can run, but also in Harrisburg, people can run for that are barred from serving locally in political office. So there are certain rules, which mean state workers, although they live in Harrisburg, they work in Harrisburg, they can't run for office. This is seen as not political and therefore an eligible thing. So we might be able to tap a whole group of individuals that maybe have wanted to pitch in and wanted to be a part, but don't want the work of serving on a school board or are banned for running for city council or something like that because of their political state job. After that, the commission would work for a period of about 9 months in determining whether or not there should be a new charter. It would basically, the people who would be elected would then determine if they should move forward. City government would fund this commission, probably, $20,000, something like that, so they'd have some basic money to advertise, organize, have meetings, engage, do what they need to do. And at that point, after 9 months, they, by law, have to make a decision whether or not they want to write a new charter or whether or not they just want to stop right there and say, this isn't right or we can't do it. If they decide to move forward, then it goes on for another 9 months, so we're looking at an 18-month period in total. And then the charter document goes up itself for a vote at the following municipal election. And everybody who lives in Harrisburg will get a vote. It's an up or down vote. Do you want this new charter or do you not want this new charter? What we would do, hopefully between now and even beginning the process, is have a series of community engagement sessions where we talk about the vision and maybe inspire people to run, because it's not going to work unless people take it seriously and are really engaged. Carlisle did something, if anyone's from Carlisle, they did a home rule move. It's a much smaller city and it wasn't big, bold changes like a values reassessment that I'm saying could be a part of this and that I would propose, but they did it for small reasons. And that process worked pretty smoothly. So it's been done here in central Pennsylvania. A lot of cities have their own charters, but Harrisburg doesn't. And I think it's part of, I gave, when I was asked to sort of reflect on 2016 and what this year was going to be about for the city, I said fundamentally it's going to be about self-determination. It's going to be about whether or not the city is going to take charge of its destiny, work through the comprehensive plan and through the home rule initiative and through amending the recovery plan to basically take its government back. And what happened in Harrisburg was that we had a broken political discourse. We did have we had corruption in the system, and the city lost its sovereignty. I mean, it went into receivership. And now the process is how do we get it back, and how do we stabilize it, and how do we energize it so that our future, I can fix the budget, I can get the city on firm financial footing, but I can't fix the necessary democracy that has to be a part of us all moving forward without empowering everyone. And I'm sort of excited about the idea that a charter movement could empower everyone and could fundamentally advocate for values that maybe we have forgotten or not fundamentally enshrined. So that's a little bit about how it would work, and we can talk more about it at some point. It is sort of what we make of it, basically. That's the interesting thing. But we don't have to talk charters. We can talk crime. We could talk, got questions about new businesses, or yes?
I just want to ask a follow-up question on one of your earlier comments about the availability of illegal guns in the city.
Okay.
The gun violence issue seems to be popping up in the news from time to time this year. And so you said, within like 5 minutes anywhere in the city, you can buy a legal gun. Where are they selling them, and basically through what mechanism?
They're selling them out of the trunks of their cars. They are connected to the traffic of heroin and other drugs. They are basically in many respects, they are easier to acquire than alcohol or tobacco for a youth. It's a completely sort of unregulated black market. Now, why is it happening? It's happening because of a phenomenon called straw purchasing, which basically means that, and there are plenty of law-abiding gun owners, but there are others that go and they buy guns, and since there's no limit on how many guns you can buy, which is one of the proposals that some have made to try and fix the problem, maybe say you can only buy 1 gun a month or something, 12 guns a year, would that be enough? Well, our dialogue about guns is so it's so difficult to find consensus or compromise on that the positions are so extreme that that the NRA and others advocate against no restrictions whatsoever. So you have the ability where you can buy as much as you want. Now that means that, and there's no consequence then if you lose the guns. Now there might be a consequence down the line if the gun is eventually traced to something that you've purchased and you can prove it, but that's really hard to do. So these straw purchasers will buy guns and then they will lose the guns onto the market. They'll make a profit in that, and then the money which is used to buy them is not inexpensive, but it's used as a part of the incentive to the drug trafficking, which is an equally difficult epidemic. The heroin epidemic especially is a major problem. So guns are readily available, and we cannot somehow disconnect the shootings and the violence from that fact. And we've got to be able to talk about reasonable measures to make it harder for minors in this case to get guns. And all of these kids that are using the guns, and much of this rash of recent violence, including the most recent shooting in Harrisburg, which was done by a 19-year-old, it's all being done by individuals that aren't old enough to own a gun, can't own a gun legally, but that is the culture that is being traded in. And if you speak to the youth today, there's a couple disturbing reasons for this, and one of them is that there is a general widespread belief that change isn't possible, and that one's circumstances are not able to be overcome. And I understand this is not the belief of everyone in this room, but imagine if you were in a school system that was not providing you with an adequate education, your parents were not able to assist you or help you, you dropped out of the system, you don't have the ability to really advocate for yourself to get a job, you don't have the experience, you don't have the education, well, then you could see how this culture of a lack of being able to be a change agent could really set in. And that is then coupled with another disturbing trend, which you see in Harrisburg, and which I think you've talked about a little bit, which is that there is an increasing coarsening and violence, I think, to our discourse generally in politics and in civic engagement today. I think you see that. I'm going to make a political statement, so if you're Republicans, forgive me, but I think you see that in the Trump campaign. I think you see that in the comments of Penn Live. You see a general inability to value compromise or value working with one another, and you see a hardening of positions, and you see an essential willingness to fight. You see the dysfunction in our state legislature. You see it in Washington. There are many that believe now that you can't settle, not only can you not change your circumstances, but you can't settle your arguments through any other means than violence. So if you don't believe you can reach consensus or reach common ground, as you were saying when I came in, then you can see how that can lead and escalate to an increasing inability to settle one's differences. And then when you add to that fire the fuel of the ready accessibility of guns, it is a very dangerous and difficult problem which the city is facing. So I'm willing to talk about guns and gun control. We actually reached a point in Harrisburg where you had the state legislature, which is generally influenced by money and lobbyists, write a bill for the NRA, which basically said you don't have to be a city resident, you don't have to have any standing in any traditional sense, you can be a corporation, somewhere else, and you can sue a municipality because of its local ordinances. We have an ordinance on the books that says children shouldn't have guns. I know it sounds simple, but that's all it says. You can't have a gun if you're a child, and they sued to get that repealed. Along with all the other ordinances on the book, just on principle that there should be not that it was harming anyone, they weren't children, but and most insidiously, most importantly, the legislature wrote into the law, which is what caused the problem, which is you can not only get repealed, but you can get all your court costs paid. So you had all these lawyers able to sue and bring a suit, and then by law be able to recoup hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars from the municipality. So the city, just to defend itself, had to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars, and happily we won. We won in federal court and in local court. But had we lost, that would have been compounded. And they even said they targeted Harrisburg because they didn't think it had enough money to defend itself. So that's the extent of the influence on our political system that we see. And you really see a blurring. The NRA as a group, for instance, really is a lobby for industry. It is a lobby for gun manufacturers, which have a financial interest in selling as many guns to as many people as they can, masking itself in a sort of interpretation of the Second Amendment, which is ahistorical and really a modern creation, and then using the political finance system as a means of stifling common ground and debate and compromise. So that, in a microcosm, is a real part of the problem. And a lot of the anger and the frustration that you see, actually both from the Bernie Sanders side and the Donald Trump side of things, is that you see the desire to take the influence of money and lobbyists out of the democratic process so that you can reach, ironically, a compromise. So there are some positive things that I think we can channel and build on, but it's hard to see them sometimes when they're masked in this very divisive and angry and violent political rhetoric that comes with it. So, other thoughts? Yes?
Yeah, I was just going to say, so it sounds like the gun violence issues in Harrisburg are arising from illegal gun ownership and
That's right.
not from lawful owners or lawful purchases, things like that.
That's right. And one of the things that we've tried to do, for instance, we tried to put a higher penalty. So if you were arrested and you committed a crime and you used a gun that you were not legally allowed to possess because you were too young or you had a record or whatever, that we asked for bail to be set higher in those instances so that those individuals stayed behind bars and were not put out on the streets. We asked for $100,000 bail. At the same time, we recognize the degree to which the criminal justice system is disproportionately affects minority communities is unduly clogged and is a bit of a private enterprise in and of itself. So we're simultaneously trying to reform, for instance, our drug laws or marijuana laws in the city of Harrisburg, so that if you do get arrested for possession of marijuana, it's not going to be a misdemeanor, a mark on your record that'll keep you from getting a job in the future or lead to escalating offenses that eventually will get you in jail. So we want to keep drug users out of jail, but we want to actually put those settling their differences with guns in jail. And so that's both a sort of tough on crime and a more permissive attitude, but it's the right balance, and it's really what the city needs. That I mentioned in my talk, but we have to rely on this district justice system, which is very interesting in Pennsylvania because we elect our criminal district justices. They don't have to have any background in the law. They're elected in a very localized way, so that basically and the justice that they administer is incredibly disparate. Some judge may say a $200,000 bond. Somebody will say a $25,000 bond. The gentleman who just was arrested again for shooting the nephew of Police Chief Carter, who was 19, had already been arrested twice in the previous months and let out twice on reduced bonds because they didn't take it seriously that he had illegally shot at people with a gun. So I think we need to prioritize our approach to getting tough on that. I would hope that we could find common ground on that. I would hope that gun owners lawfully, and because no one's talking about restricting the lawful gun owner, but would focus on making sure that we do everything we can to make sure that our kids don't get guns, which admittedly is already a law. But if we can't talk about this straw purchasing issue or the importance of enforcement or background checks, or you name it, as a means of lessening the prevalence of the guns, that's where we get in trouble, because that part of the conversation is equally unacceptable to the lobby. I don't think the majority of people. Any other non-political questions? Yes, or we can be political, but I don't want to polarize the group.
Actually, it is a political question,
Okay.
but it's governmental.
Sure.
And the question is, I mean, we've talked a lot about the problems that you see and how you're going to address them, and some of the other problems that people brought up here. I'd like to reverse it a little bit. What do you see as the biggest assets of the community of Harrisburg, and how do you envision being able to leverage or manipulate those assets to the benefit of Harrisburg to convince, for example, a private citizen to come in and buy a home in a particular area and use his or her funds to make it into a new space for themselves, and thus, sort of get that type of synergy and energy, whatever you want to call it, Joe?
So let me answer that in a variety of different ways, because I think there are a lot of incredible assets of Harrisburg. One asset of Harrisburg, which is understood, is that we are the capital, which means that from a policy standpoint, we can do things that and people are listening and watching and really seeing. We can lead, I think, Pennsylvania on a lot of policy issues. So if we're talking about guns, or we're talking about violent crime or drug law reform or other things, we can lead that conversation in ways that have a big influence. That's just a theoretical aside. From a practical standpoint, I think the greatest value of Harrisburg is in the region as a whole, is in the relatively low cost of living, the general proximity to all the major cities of the East Coast, and the relatively inexpensive opportunities that there are for not only home ownership but also starting a business. I came to Harrisburg and was able to purchase property for my business. I started small and then got a bigger one, eventually got a warehouse. I could do these sorts of things in Harrisburg because the cost of doing that is so much less than the cost is in other parts of even in other parts of the state, but certainly in New England, which is where I went to school and where I'd spent a lot of time. So the opportunities are there. The drawback has to do with the property tax structure and how oppressive that can be, but I think we're moving towards a sort of bipartisan elimination of the property tax. I think that is achievable and almost was achievable this past term, and I think the Democrats and the Republicans both want it for different reasons. And in the meantime, what the city is trying to do is, through this LRTA bill, is to basically pass a 10-year full abatement, which says, right now you can purchase hundreds of properties in Harrisburg for $1. You can't. That's not the problem. But the problem is that that you're probably not going to want to go in and put the investment into fixing up those properties, only to be sort of taxed on that investment immediately. And you might have trouble, you will have trouble fundamentally from a bank saying that it's worth putting $40,000 into this property or $50,000 into fixing it up. Well, changing the tax structure, which basically means that you don't pay any taxes on improvements for 10 years, is such a big incentive that it really, I think, will spur development. So that, coupled with the relatively low cost of living, the relatively low cost of real estate, with the tax incentive addressing the property taxes, I think that sets the stage in the city and the region for true development. Now, the great strength of Harrisburg, as opposed to the region, is the urban structure and the urban environment. It's the park system as well. We've got a wonderful green belt and beautiful parks and playgrounds. We're trying to invest in those again, and we've gotten a lot of grants to revitalize throughout the whole city. But that is the sort of historical legacy of Harrisburg. We have the housing stock, although we have to demolish a lot of buildings that are beyond repair, or that have caught on fire, or that have fallen apart. The goal is to stop that trend and to infill where we can. And I think that people will want to move to Harrisburg because of the ability to walk to work, or the ability to live in a neighborhood where you have true connections, something other than suburbia. And I can go on about places to eat and shop and things to do, but I would live nowhere else other than Harrisburg. I think it's an absolutely amazing place, and I think people fall in love with it on a regular basis. I think we can sometimes be our own worst enemy, though, and there is definitely an outsider-insider tension that has held us back in the past, and it's something that we have to collectively work through. But I think we can work through as long as everyone knows that we're committed to the same core values of whether it's improving racial relations or eradicating poverty or focusing on education. If we're focused on those things that can unite us, I think the opportunities are limitless. So I'm very optimistic about Harrisburg's future. And from a government standpoint, we have to model stability, a lack of scandal, quiet competence, not a lot of excitement. We have to literally pick up the trash and do basic things and get the city on a positive system. And all that together will lead to people coming back. I think you're seeing people coming back to urban cores throughout the country. I think it will happen here in central Pennsylvania. I see you. So I don't want to take too much more time, but
I did want to
you're
ask
good.
you
Yes.
if you would save time for a photo.
I think we should do a photo. If you will still take a photo with me after all those strong statements, I would be honored. And just remember, we can find common ground on any issue if we work together and we recognize the values that we all share. The goal is to figure out where we want to go and then get there, even if we have different strategies about getting there. Focus on what we all want to attain. And we can do that through collaboration and dialogue and discussion, and through the great works of your community leadership team. And I think this is a wonderful program because it does bring together people from all aspects of the region, all parties, all backgrounds, and it talks about leadership in a way that is really about you all being the change agents, making the difference, and that's what we need. Active, engaged people that want to make a difference.